with Premier Guitar. We're in Santa Barbara, California at the Seymour Duncan plant, and I am with the man himself, Seymour Duncan.
Hello, folks.
Seymour, thanks so much for having us here. I'm a long-time fan.
That's great.
First-time visitor.
Oh, good. Well, you got a little break in the weather, which is nice, you know.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
We all need that.
Yeah.
But, I came here many years ago with Cathy Carter Duncan, in Topanga, California. And she was friends with Bernie Ladd and Don Felder from the Eagles and everything. And she used to take care of Don Felder's kids when they were little sprouts, you know. And then we moved up here. We've been in Santa Barbara since about 1976. So that's when we started the factory. And I started doing rewinds for Dave Schecter, years ago. Mm-hmm. And then I said, God, I want to make some pickups, you know. So we got a big order from Japan, and so I had to find this vulcanized fiber, which is the fiber that Fender used for all their flat work.
Yeah.
So I got the fiber, and then my other engineer here, Kevin Beller, we would route out each piece one at a time, and then we have to drill each hole out one at a time. I mean, we were making all the flat work by hand, which was incredible. You know, it was pretty wild. But I think doing it that way, you learn every right and wrong of how to do something. You know, and then we got a Roper Whitney punch, which was so neat. We made this fixture where we slide the flat work in and punch a hole, a 3/16 inch hole for the pole piece. So I did that, and then you move it over a little bit, and you do 3 holes, flip it over, and do the other 3 holes. And that helped us make all the Strat flat work and Telecaster. And then we got into P-Bass and the Jazz Bass and the Jaguar and the Jazz Master. So we were routing out each piece and making all these holes. And then we would take the punch-out holes in a pea shooter. Shoot them at the employees, you know. I mean, it was fun. I mean, we had a good time, and it was all learning, you know. What was really cool, though, we had guys from Fender would come up, and I remember, you know, back when I was in Bridgeton, New Jersey, I used to write this one guy, Bill Carson, from Fender, and I would ask him all these questions about when was the first year of a Telecaster, a Stratocaster, a Jazz Master, all these Fender guitars. And he would write me back. You know, like a month later, I get a letter from him. And then finally, like in 78, 79, I was at the NAMM show. And I'm walking around. I went to the Fender booth. So I was like a spring chicken here. But so I go into the Fender booth, and I see this guy. His name is Bill Carson on his name tag, you know. And I said, Mr. Carson, I said, you won't remember this probably, but I used to write to you many years ago and ask you all these questions about when did you first manufacture these guitars, you know? And he looked at me and says, you're that guy. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, you're the guy that made me do all that work, you know. So he said, I had to go through all the old files because we never kept records of it, you know. And he said, you were so early at wanting to know about the history of the Fender company. You know, we thought it was very cool, you know. And then now here you are making guitar pickups and replicas and rewinds and everything. And he thought that was so cool, but he was one of the first guys that really helped me at Fender, you know. And then some of the Fender crew would come up to Santa Barbara, and they would see us manufacture. You know, we were doing one pickup, one at a time, you know. And they would say to me, you know, Bill Carson would say, you know, when we used to do this, here's how we used to grind the magnets. We used to get like a stick with a hole in it and put a rubber grommet in it and slide the magnet into it and turn it on the grinding wheel, you know. I said, oh, okay. And then we started talking about waxing pickups, and I told him that I had a thing how I would vacuum wax the bobbins, you know, to get the air out of it real quick so you wouldn't have to leave them in too long, you know. And at the time, you know, I was rewinding all the Gibson style, the Melody Maker pickups, PAFs, all this. And some guys wanted them potted. And it was a big thing back in the early 80s and everything. Everybody was taking out all their old pickups and putting in all the new modern things that were out there. It could have been DiMarzio. We didn't, at the time I started rewinding, we didn't have humbuckers yet, you know. So for me, it was kind of neat that every pickup I got to rewind, I would take apart and measure everything. Man, I had
Wow.
the first tools were my calipers. You know, God, I love my calipers. You know, and then I made a dewinder so I could figure out how many turns were on each bobbin and everything. So that was how I started all the history and all the theory of all the different pickups and how they were all different and how I could tell if a pickup was hand wound or machine wound. And normally all the Gibson pickups were machine wound, not hand wound. And some people wind humbuckers by hand winding, and you shouldn't do that because both bobbins are different then. You know, you can't wind them exactly the same. So I figured all this out. I would count number of turns and all the magnet strength, and I had Gauss meters, and I made my own, you know, measuring tools for doing all this stuff, you know, for how to do it, you know. So that's how I started.
Isn't that amazing that back then you could, I mean, people today couldn't even fathom it, but now you can just order pickups, get whatever you want. Back then, if your pickup broke, you had to find a repairman to fix it.
Yeah, you either rewind or throw it in the trash and start over. I mean, some guys, you know, they try to work on their own guitars sometimes, you know, and I've seen messes out there.
Oh,
you know,
I've made those messes. Yeah.
You don't tell anybody that. So anyway, that's how. And then I bought my first coil machine, and then we got an old, I think it was a Bobbin coil machine, and that's how I did all my hand winding on that. All the Strats and all the single coils, Fenders type, were all hand wound that I would do, you know, and. So that's how it pretty much all started. And then we started doing more and more. And then we went to a place called Hughes Plastic in St. Joseph, Michigan. And it was told to me by the humbucker designer, Seth Lover. And Seth told me this is who made our bobbins, you know. And then Kevin and I contacted him. Kevin did the drawings, and we sent him up there. And I had to find a certain plastic. You know, I wanted a certain kind of, I think it was made by DuPont. And so they knew all the specs. They said, oh, you want this kind of plastic, blah, blah, blah. And so they started making them, and then we made our first bobbins. God, do you remember what year? Did MJ ever tell you that? No. It was like 79, 80 or something. And but it was in the first days of Seymour Duncan. And the cool thing is, having a humbucker back then was really kind of neat.
Sure.
And then I started doing, and that before that, that's when I did the Jeff Beck Telegib with the first JB and a jazz model, a JM for John Milner. He was a character in American Graffiti.
Really?
He had the yellow highboy, but I couldn't call it the John Milner because I did it for Jeff. I made the guitar to give to Jeff. And Jeff knew who John Milner was, but nobody else was doing it. So when I went in production, I couldn't call it the John Milner. I just called it the JM or a jazz model.
Oh.
And the JB was not for Jeff Beck. It was for jazz blues. So I just called it the JB, you know, and it's still like our main selling pickup here.
Well, and I think most of us players, we still think of that as JB as Jeff Beck.
Everybody does, you know, and he did Cause We Ended as Lovers, you know, with George Martin and stuff.
Right.
And that's how that whole guitar trade thing came about and stuff, you know. But he's still, to his last day, just a masterful player. You know? Still one of my favorites, you know, of all time, you know. And it was neat. We got him at the NAMM show one time, and Dwayne Eddy was there and everything, and James Burton. We all got photos with him together and stuff. So I was very proud of that. You know?
Seymour, you were there for the entire history of like guitardom. It's really
I grew up in a guitar era, which was great, man.
Yeah.
You know, the Fireballs, you know, George Tomsko, you know, and especially, you know, Dwayne Eddy and James Burton with all the Ricky Nelson stuff he did. I mean, his solos were masterful. I mean, to this day, they're...
To this day.
He was like 17, 18 years old, you know, just... the guy was just so cool, you know, and so I was in my youngest son, Derek Burton, is named after James Burton, which was so cool.
That is so cool.
And so it was, for me, that was neat to do that, and so I've been very, very lucky, to meet all the players that I did, and I guess pay homage to them, all these great players.
Well, and really kind of helped them on their journey, I mean, you're part of their tone, so.
Yeah, I mean, I would think of it that way, and like I did Michael Cimbello when he did Maniac. I built the stack pickups that were prototypes in his guitar, and he got a Grammy for that, which was so cool, and so meeting some of these players to me is just incredible. Jesse Ed Davis, I just loved. He worked with Jackson Browne and all these sessions he did. And so many of them we lost so early too. All these great players. And that's why. And Danny Gatton and I were good friends. And Danny and I, we'd go out looking for arrowheads. We were up in Canada and we're along the riverbeds in the mud. And we walked into this club that we were going to play at that night. And the club owner says, "Get the hell out of here," with those muddy clothes on. Yeah, who do you think you are? And Danny says, "Well, we're the band." It was so cool, I mean, to me, I just love it, And we traded I made him a bunch of arrowheads and stuff for like guitar picks and everything. But Danny was a fantastic player, it's just so good,
Mind-blowing.
Mind-blowing, And through the years, just meeting all these players, and then I would do all the Texas guitar shows, and then all the great guys were down there, I knew Albert Collins and, Gatemouth Brown, and I worked with all these guys, and I was so lucky to have had a chance to do that, and so it's cool.
Well, and it's amazing that all those relationships and all that work you did turned into this, and now we're gonna kind of see how it's all done.
Yeah, I want you guys to go around with Mark and Derek. Derek's gonna be here soon, and then just check out. And things grow and grow and grow. It's amazing. I just remember I still have my old office here, and I would work in it and do my rewinds and customize things, and that's the stuff I did. I'm into like engraving covers and stuff, and then I did a bunch of, probably the experimenting of new pickups, I've done a lot of that, and it was neat. Like we had George Fullerton come up here, and hang out with us and everything, and the people that are the guys that I looked up to growing up, from the Fender Company or Gibson. And I went to Kalamazoo, Michigan, and met Ted McCarthy, and I had lunch with him and everything. And so I was very lucky. And I would ask all these guys these questions about why did you do this or do that, And they knew that I really loved pickups. I wanted to know as much as I could about them. So I would get home at the hotel when I was in Kalamazoo, and I'd write down what building here, what equipment was over here, and I did all the drawings, So I would write everything down, what we talked about, and so I still have all my notes, And then
we got to see these notes.
Oh yeah, there I can show them to you later. But the fun thing too is like hanging out with Seth Lover, who invented the humbucking pickup, which to me is like, it's so cool, And the thing with him is I would stay down at his house in Garden Grove at the time. And he showed me all this stuff, and then he got pretty ill, when he was in his late 80s. And then when he passed away, his family gave me his whole garage of all his stuff,
Oh, that's beautiful.
All the transformers and testing equipment. And we were both in the ham radio, so they gave me all the ham radio equipment. A lot of it I gave to the local Santa Barbara club here, but he had like 10,000 tubes, radio tubes. It's like, gosh. So anyway, I got him to the club, and we did like a benefit for Seth and everything, and would give money to his family and everything. And we did the Seth Lover model,
Oh yeah.
And so that was really cool. And then he would get like a royalty for each pickup, and then he would give it to his kids for I guess college education and everything.
Sure.
So that was cool. That's what he wanted.
I remember, I think the advertisement came out, and he had like a quote saying, "Why would anybody do a pickup with my name on it?" And it was very sweet, like
Yeah.
sort of a self-deprecating,
Yeah,
genius.
I know. Well, he designed the Thunderbird and the mini humbuckers and everything. He did the wide humbucker for Fender. The
Sure, the
3-and-3 pole. I don't know. I don't even know what they call it. It's some model
the
number.
wide range, I think.
Yeah, wide range. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he designed that and everything, and so I have all his notes to all that stuff. Which is so cool.
Yeah.
And it'll be in my book someday.
Okay, I look forward to reading it.
Yeah. Yeah, so I have all this cool stuff. But I hope you guys have a good tour of the factory here. There's a lot of fun stuff to see, and you'll see a lot of history too.
Okay.
The stuff we got here. But
Can't
thank you.
wait.
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm with Marc DiLorenzo, who is the CEO of Seymour Duncan. Marc, thanks for having us.
John, great to see you. Thanks for coming and hanging out with us today.
Thrilled to be here. So I guess we're overlooking the flat factory floor here.
This is the production floor. Yeah, we've been in Santa Barbara since 1976. We've outgrown a couple of facilities, so we've been in this one for almost 30 years. But this is where it all still happens. We're making pickups by hand every day here. Every pickup's still handmade in Santa Barbara. We have some new kind of production methods and some custom machinery that we've built, but still everything has to be built by hand, and that's how we still do it here.
Now, how many pickups? How many different pickups? I can't even fathom how many are in your line.
We have over 1,300 different types of pickups that we make. So it's we have certain things that are the perennials, like the JB and the 59, and some vintage inspired pickups. But we never stop developing new pickups. We have 20 new models coming out this year alone. We're always talking to musicians and talking to players, and you know how guitar players are. They never stop chasing tone. So we're there to help them find that tone.
Right, and you've got all these different signatures, and then the replicas of like Bonamassa pickups, and your antiquity line, and
yeah, we don't really discontinue pickups because we just keep growing the family of pickups that we make, and so we have to be very organized and methodical about our operations. That's part of what's happening down there, is making sure that we're making the right pickup at the right time, so we get it into customers' hands as quickly as we can, and that's part of the magic of how you can make 1,300 different models of pickups.
God, that's amazing.
Yeah, we're really, really lucky. Our customers are really, really loyal. We have a customer service department. We take phone calls every day from customers. You can still go to our website and find a phone number and call us up, and we love to talk about gear and pickups, and that's been the thing since day one. Before you could slap a return label on a box and send it back to Amazon, we had a 21-day return policy, so people could put the pickups in their guitar and check them out, make sure they like them, and we still have that. So customers are always top priority for us.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that is such a cool policy. You can buy a pickup, put it in, and if it's not what you want, you can exchange for something else.
Anything else, yeah, or refund. Refund if you don't like it at all. And that's, again, when we have 1,300 pickups, that's why we have our customer service team who's there to help you find the right thing for your style of music and the guitar that you have. Or if you even just need help with figuring out the wiring diagram, how to put it in your guitar, we'll help you out with that too.
Now I'm with Derek Duncan. We are on the floor. He's going to kind of show us through.
Yeah, so here we are in the warehouse. This is where all the raw materials are. This is where everything comes in at the very beginning point of it being a pickup. So this is all the raw materials and components, lead wires, the magnet wire, magnets, flatwork, everything like that. So when things come in, they get a full inspection. That way when parts go to the production floor, everything is perfect. We don't have any bottlenecks. We don't have any turnbacks. So everything gets inspected before it gets put on the shelf. That way we're not, playing catch up halfway through the process.
Well, that's amazing. So everything, all the material that you buy, you don't just assume it's right. You actually check it to make sure it's
so
up to your specs.
We don't buy very many parts off the shelf. Even like certain fasteners and screws, we have custom made. So everything we've designed here, and then we have that made specifically for us. So if a piece of flatwork comes in and it's out by 6,000ths, that's out of spec. So we'll talk with our vendor. We'll have MDR, which is a material discrepancy report, and then we'll work out a solution to see if the tooling needs to be changed or if there was an issue with, say, humidity or something like that. So we want to ensure that everything that we can control, that we are controlling, and that's, tooling up our own bobbins, tooling up our flatwork, working directly with the magnet manufacturer. So we have complete control, as much as we can for, we're not relying on a third party, source for a part that we can't control.
So how often do you find discrepancies? Is that very common? I
It's-
would think it wouldn't be such an issue, but you actually go to the trouble of checking.
We still want to check everything. We do AQL sampling for some parts. So if we know things rarely have a failure, we won't inspect as many per, if there's 10,000 screws, you're not going to test every single one. So you're going to, obviously, with certain components, you test, every couple hundred. We've worked with a lot of our vendors for decades, so
Sure.
we've gotten a good relationship where they know, okay, if we send them this, they're going to reject it. So, we have a really good set of vendors, so everything's pretty reliable for us. And, every once in a while there are some mistakes that will come through, but we know how to work those out and get parts in a timely manner. So we work, with the vendors, with our production crew, with engineering to make sure we can basically have our goal is to have production sustaining. So we
Sure.
don't want to have an order due for a customer and have that be held up because of a mounting ring is out of spec or something. So we do a good job with safety stocks, with vendor lead times. The last couple of years have tested that a little bit, but
Right. Yeah.
so
But
we've had
you-
to readjust a little bit.
But even through the pandemic, apparently, with the exception of 1 month, you guys were running the entire time.
Yeah, we were running almost the whole time. I was having to go to UPS and load my van with all the boxes and stuff. So it was a little challenging at times,
Yeah.
but we made it through it. And luckily, a lot of our parts, they don't really expire per se, so we
Sure.
could order a little more when there were vendor glitches and things like that. So
Well, there were a lot of guitar players during lockdown that said, "I want to change pickups."
yeah, yeah. So we tried our best to make sure if they did want a specific model that we could actually deliver that and they wouldn't have to settle for plan B. So
Yeah, that's great. Well, I can't wait to see how these are made.
all right, here is one of our high-tech fixtures for testing magnet wire. So one thing we'll do when the magnet wire comes in is we'll test every single roll. So even though it may say it's 42 gauge, throughout the manufacturing process, it could be stretched into, say, a 43 gauge, or it could be mislabeled, or if it's a cold day versus a hot day, the wire is going to read different. So this way we take all those factors into account to make sure that this wire, if we receive it on a rainy day like today, and then we use it this summer when it's in a heat wave, that when we're winding the certain number of turns on the pickup, that pickup will be in spec. So
Oh, so there's just absolute consistency
yeah.
in every model.
Yes, we try to control everything so we don't have any surprises throughout the floor. It's if we're winding a batch for an OEM and we have a whole tray of pickups that are out of spec, that's not a good problem to have. So we
Yeah.
like to catch that here so we can work with the vendor to get the appropriate wire that we need if there is an issue. And this is just one way we ensure that. So that way when we move to the production floor, we go to winding. If we wind a pickup this week or we wind it 2 years from now, it's going to sound exactly the same.
Okay, so where are we now?
So this is the production planning office. We have Sal and Felipe here. They've both been here a while. Sal, I think, 25 years. Both of them used to work on the production floor. Really good understanding of how everything works throughout the whole process. So they're the ones that are going to take all the orders that get entered by sales into the ERP system. They're going to basically plan what we need to build with our over 1,000 SKUs. They're going to make sure that those are all delivered in time to shipping to reach the customer when the due date is. So
Yeah, I imagine with a product line of 1,300 different pickups, it would take some planning to decide what you need to get out.
yeah, there's a lot. We try to have safety stocks. So if we have, we'll work on forecasts. So we kind of expect to sell a certain number of certain different SKUs. And then we also mix in things like shop floor custom and OEM order. So there's a lot, many moving parts that they need to sort out, and they've done a tremendous job. So, and it's can't thank them enough, So
Yeah, so if it's suddenly you realize, we need some pearly gates right away.
Yeah.
These guys.
They'll make stuff happen. They'll know where all the other job orders are. They'll know what can, okay, we can hold this order up for maybe 3 days and we'll scoot that one in, real quick. So they're very flexible in helping us, deliver on time to our customers. So here we have Jose, who's been with us for 43 years, works in the custom shop. He is drilling some, looks like NYC 5-string covers. So these are a dual coil soap bar bass pickup. Depending on the spacing configuration, the type of bass that's going in, we'll drill the holes accordingly. Here we have Miguel. He is grinding magnets. So when the rod magnets come in, they're precision ground, precision cut on both sides. This step we're adding a chamfer, which is kind of a bevel around the top of the magnet. It's a feature that doesn't really impact the tone of the pickup or the assembly, but it's something that if you look at a vintage pickup from 50, 60, 70 years ago, they'll have this chamfer on the top. So when we're recreating, a pickup that's supposed to sound like that, we try to go to the, every little step we can to make it as vintage accurate and correct as possible. So this is one of those steps we've been doing for, since day one. And this definitely is time consuming. This is one of my first jobs, when I was in probably elementary school. I'd sit outside with my little radio and, a bag of like 1,000 magnets and just sit there grinding all day.
Really?
So it's pretty repetitive, but it's something we have to do. So we're in the bobbin assembly area here. This is where we prepare all the components before they can go out to production and wind. One of the steps we do here is magnetize all of our Alnico magnets. First we'll mark them. I don't know if you can see, there's a little blue mark, so that's an Alnico 2. So depending on the grade of magnet, we have Alnico 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, a few types of ceramic. We have some rough cast, some unoriented, so we have many different kinds of magnets. So with the Alnicos especially, they all look identical. So that's where one of the first steps is marking them, so we know in the line, if you're using the magnet with the black stripe, that's an Alnico 5. Where if the order calls for, an Alnico 2, you can visually see that. Otherwise, you wouldn't know that there was an issue until final inspection when the Gauss reading was coming out too strong. So here's a magnet, not magnetized. So these are a couple of our magnetizers.
So when they come in, they're not,
Yeah.
it's just metal.
Because the way they're stacked, especially with Alnico magnets, they'll want to flip on each other, and if there's one that's stronger, that can kind of demagnetize another one. So
Really?
this ensures that when we receive them in, we can magnetize them. Then they go into another one of our high-tech fixtures here. But we've been doing this for 40 plus years. This basically separates them so they're not too close and pulling from one another. So here in bobbin assembly is where we take a lot of these raw materials and we finish them into components that can be used in the winding process or in the general assembly process. We'll take, with the winding tooling, which we design and we build here, that basically allows us to insert the rod magnets into flatwork, which forms that like a Strat or a Tele or Jazz bass, that kind of 4-bond coil assembly. From there it goes into the lacquer booth. That's where it gets dipped in lacquer that coats the magnets. We'll do a final wrap of tape on some models too, just to prevent any shorting. But that's one of those vintage features that we do across many of our models. So this is our pad print machine. This is where everything with the Seymour Duncan logo gets its logo. It looks like we're working on some blackout covers here. We have a number of different cliches. We'll make those in-house also. So depending if we have a limited run artist signature we need or a prototype to mock something up, this is where we'll do that. So here we are in the winding. We've got Fernando here working on the Lisona. This is a machine we've had for a number of decades. This was actually in the Gibson factory when they moved from Kalamazoo. So we've had this. So this, PAS, old P90s would have been wound on this actual machine. So when you buy an antiquity model, a Seth Lover, some of our other vintage humbuckers wound with plain enamel wire, we still wind them on the same machine. In this machine, we still keep it pretty manual. We've added some turn counters and a little solenoid to stop the machine. So instead of winding it for a certain, period of time, we're winding it to a known number of turns. That allows us to keep that consistency. So over here, we're doing, it looks like a hot rail. This is a hum canceling Strat pickup. It's going to be voiced more like a humbucker. This is not a vintage design by any means, so that's where you'll see that has a little pin boss instead of a pigtail or an eyelet. That allows us a little more flexibility in product design, where we're not really bound by any vintage details or vintage spec. So here we are in Pigtail. This is after a humbucker leaves the winder. We have two little tiny bits of wire hanging off, anywhere from 38 to 45 gauge. These are way too thin to work with. So they go from here to Pigtail, which looks like a pigtail, gets wrapped around. This is a 26 gauge. This acts as a strain relief before the lead wire gets hooked up. So here we are in humbucker assembly. This is where we take the two coils that are pigtailed. We take the bottom plate, magnet, machined metal spacer, and plastic or wood spacer, and we assemble that into one unit. So here we are in Bobbin hookup. This is where the beginning and ending pigtails will get soldered to the 4-conductor cable. So this is the 4-conductor that you're going to then install into your guitar. So Maria here is doing final inspection on some single coils. We'll inspect 100% of our pickups. She's been doing this for 20 years and has another 12 years on top of that. So working here for 32 years, really knows the ins and outs. And if something comes up, she's definitely got an eye for inspection.
So now we're at potting.
Yeah, so this is the wax potting process. What this does is basically applies a vacuum, which all the air is evacuated out and the wax goes in. So if you've ever heard a guitar squeal on stage, it's many times from a pickup that's not potted at all, or a pickup that's not potted enough. And basically you hit the natural frequency of that vibration, which just gets out of control, and those parts are kind of moving a little bit. Even though everything's assembled and wound tight and taped, you still have room for basically the sound coming out of the speaker to, basically interact with those parts in there and make them move, which creates this feedback, and then it gets out of control. So wax potting wasn't something that like an old PAF would have. Back then the amps weren't, super high gain. So once you started having higher gain amps, people playing louder, that's where wax potting has really become a necessity for most modern pickups. So some pickups like the Seth Lover, the Antiquity humbuckers, if we're really going for a vintage, tone, vintage feel, vintage construction, that's where we will not wax pot them.
Yeah.
A lot of those will also use butyrate, which is a plastic that was around in the 50s. Wasn't the most modern plastic, so doesn't really have the tolerance for heat like a more modern plastic would. So
Right.
if you put a PAF in here, you can melt and shrink the coil and really damage it. So when we do special orders and pot those, we have a little procedure we do that seems to work pretty well without damaging them. But there's really a fine line there.
Yeah, and I can remember back in the day when I was a kid, a friend of mine potting with, literally had paraffin wax in a coffee can and destroying a PAF.
Yeah, we've seen some. We'll get we've been doing rewind since day one. So every
Sure.
once in a while, hey, I have a PAF that's not working, and you get this thing, and you're like, oh my, somebody did something wrong.
Yeah, right.
But so the wax process, I can go through that now if you'd like.
Yeah, no, let's see it.
So for most pickups, we're gonna soak the pickup in wax, let that sit a while, so that way it can get up to temp, and then we'll shut the lid and pull a vacuum. That's like the full potting procedure. Some other pickups though we'll leave in the wax without the vacuum, so it's kind of a lighter potting. And we have a couple that are in between there. So
Yeah.
Here's how that goes. So we have the pickups submerged in there. We'll shut our valve, and then we can see the vacuum being pulled here. So we have a vacuum pump down there. Takes us somewhere to the vacuum of outer space, so you wouldn't want to be inside the machine.
Right.
But eyes might pop out or something.
Yeah. I've got some of your antiquities and they're not potted and they're a little microphonic, which I love
Yeah.
because they they're just so alive, and you can kind of work
And
that towards your tone.
we had a wax pot with a Lexan top before, which was really cool because you get to see all the bubbles and all the air coming out of that pickup. And
Oh, yeah.
it was like this boiling cauldron of humbuckers in there. So we'll usually keep it at, what is it, 29 milligrams of mercury? I should get that from Kevin, but
Yeah.
so the unit of measure for wax. And then we'll leave it there for a certain period of time. And that way that ensures that, based on the pickup we're building, we know what it's going to take to fully wax pot that. Certain pickups have a little more metal mass, they take longer to heat up, and those might require more time to get the wax fully, impregnated into all the little nooks and crannies in the pickup. Okay, here are our bottom plate subassemblies. This is where we solder a lead wire, whether it's a single or two conductor or a four conductor, to a bottom plate. These are a few of the different ones we have for different models. Here's something with the vintage kind of single or two conductor with the long legs. You'll see that has no logo, so we're going to use that in an antiquity. Seymour Duncan didn't make pickups in the 50s, so that's part of
Sure.
why that looks like that. Here's a four conductor, shorter leg. This has availability for two adjustable bobbins. This is something where a lot of more modern guitars have shallower routes, so having something like the long leg pickup is more, it's a more vintage feature that you're going to have in a Les Paul SG, stuff like that, where this will fit in a wider variety of guitars. And then the four conductor lead wire allows you to wire it up with some custom wiring versus having a standard series humbucker wiring. We have different string spacing, trumbucker. Some customers may want a black finish if they're doing a direct mount and they don't want to see that silver coming through the finish in the guitar. It kind of allows the pickup to be a bit more hidden in there. But yeah, these are some of the options we have here. So here we are in engineering. We have Kevin Beller here. He's been with the company 44 years, so just after day one. He's designed many of our products over the years. He's done all the original drawings, whether it's a raw material for a vendor to make a mold, or if it's the whole pickup assembly and how that's going to go together. So here he's testing some pickups that went through a pilot run. This is a newer model we're working on, so something that Kevin designed, and now he's checking it after it's gone through production to make sure it was actually made per the design and all the specs are where they need to be.
Yeah, so what we're checking, these are some Jared James Nichols P90 pickups, and they're built on a new technology that we developed, and actually Jared was one of the first guys to benefit from this. This is a 3-coil humbucking design. Most humbuckers are two coils. We came up with a way to do 3 coils, and the reason for that was because we wanted to maintain the appearance of a standard P90. So they have a row of pole pieces that go right down the center. Most humbuckers that you see, they're either a stack with a central row of pole pieces, or they're a 2-coil humbucker with pole pieces on one side or the other. This is an improvement on a stack in that you don't get so much low frequency cancellation that you get with a normal stack. So this is it's a cool design. Jared was one of the first guys to try it out. He kind of fell in love with it immediately. And we've done with any new product, we do pilot builds to be able to kind of flush out any problems that are going to occur in production, to see how the assembly procedure flows, to see if there's understanding with our assemblers of how something's going to be built. And especially something like this, it's a little bit more complicated wiring. It's different than anything they've done before. So we have 1, maybe 2 or more pilot builds, however many we think we need to do before everybody is really, things are flowing smoothly, they're understanding what's going on. So after the pilot build, we bring them in here, and there's a whole series of specifications that we check. And right now what I'm checking is I'm checking the resonant frequency. And we have this is an old clanky fixture. We probably built this thing 30, 35 years ago. I have another one at home that's a lot slicker, but this one still does the same job. And we hook the pickup up, and we have a couple wires that we connect to the fixture. We have to make sure the ground wires twist it in, it'll affect the resonant frequency. And we just hook them up, and we have a signal generator, distortion analyzer, but we're just using the signal generation portion. And we basically just scan frequencies a little bit, and we're looking for where the needle peaks. And you know, the kind of fine tune that in, and we can read the frequency off the scope over here. So this one is 4.13 kilohertz resonant frequency. So we go through, we have a form that we've developed for listing all these different specs. We're going to check DCR, which is what most people are really familiar with. We check inductance and Q, resonant frequency, which is what I'm doing here. We'll do Gauss testing to make sure that the magnetic strength is correct. And then we will even do a strum test. And we have an old guitar down here that's our strum tester. I won't pull it out. It's a kind of have to crawl under the bench to get it. But it's basically a guitar with 3 large slots, and it's got a mechanical arm that's spring loaded. And we retract the arm, and we load the pickup in, we retract the arm, and we let it swing across the strings. And then we use a digital oscilloscope to record the peak reading. So we get you know, an actual strum. It's in a real guitar. We record. We usually gather maybe 10 or 15 readings, and then we average them all out because there's always some little variations, and that's part of the information that goes onto our website for the output readings that we get. So it's our own method. I can't say that it's standardized industry wide, but it's what we always use, and it's particular to us.
So earlier, John was asking about the different grades of magnet, you know, whether to use a 2 or a 5 or an 8. How does that play a part in the pickup design?
Well, it depends on whether we're trying to duplicate something or we have a design intent of some sort. So if we're duplicating a vintage pickup, and in the case of, like, for example, Joe Bonamassa, we've done a lot of duplication of different guitars. So we go in, we measure the Gauss strength, and that gives us a pretty good indicator of what grade of Alnico it is. So in general, as you progress from the lower Alnicos, 1s, 2s, 3s, to the higher up to 8 and 10s and 11s, the Gauss strength gets higher in general. 3s are a little bit lower than 2s. That's an exception to the rule. 3s are very low Gauss strength. And there's a Alnico 5.7 that's incredibly high Gauss strength. What brings the difference is mostly the alloy, how much cobalt is in the chemical makeup of the grade of Alnico. In some cases, they also have methods of orienting the grain structure during the manufacturing of the product itself. So there's what they call chill plates, where they pour the molten material onto a plate and they rapidly put an orientation field in there, and it kind of freezes the grain structure in a certain orientation. You can get really high Gauss strengths. Like Alnico 5.7 is, you know, it's a highly oriented methodology like I just described. Some of the other lower grades, like 3s and 2s, are actually considered unoriented. They if you were to look up in the spec sheets, it would say, you know, no orientation. But when we magnetize it obviously we need to have some orientation or they wouldn't really work. But we by our you know, when we magnetize the magnet itself, it gives it a grain orientation, or it gives it a field direction. Generally speaking, most people consider vintage pickups to be the lower grades of Alnico, and in general that is true, but still some of the very early Strat pickups are still made with Alnico 5s. So you can't just jump in there and go, well, all vintage pickups are Alnico 2s and all the newer stuff is Alnico 5. Not necessarily true. I've found as we've gone through some of these old guitars, like for example, Joe Bonamassa had an old Flying V, and really like 50s Flying V, old, and it had Alnico 6s in it. So unexpected, you know, you just weren't, I thought, oh, this thing's going to have 2s or 3s or 4s or something, and I measure it and I'm like, nope, these are Alnico 6s. So you just have to check. There's not any hard, fast rule. Sometimes it was a matter of scarcity. I remember conversations with Seth Lover, and I asked him one time, because this is like the big controversy, what did PAFs really have? He said, well, we used originally Alnico 5, but at one point we ran out. So we had to go down and we could get Alnico 2s. We were able to, kind of like running down to the hardware store almost, getting what they had and continuing production. Production was the most important thing to Gibson and to Leo Fender. I mean, the whole idea was producing a product and getting it into the marketplace. So, he said the same thing about black plastic. He said we ran out of black, we got cream. We used cream. Sometimes we had mixtures of cream and black, so that's where your zebras came from. The highly prized PAF zebras. But it was a little bit random, and it was all practical. That was what drove it.
So Mark, we're not in the pickup making area anymore. Where are we now?
We are not. We're in a special area. This is where we're building our pedals and our PowerStage amplifiers.
Oh, great.
Today we don't have any pedals being built, but we are assembling some of our PowerStage pedal format amplifiers. And if you've seen these in use, a lot of guys are using them on pedal boards as clean power. So people are using either digital modeling amps or just analog pedals as their main guitar tone. They put this PowerStage, they put it right on their pedal board, and that's their entire rig. They go and they can plug it into a speaker cabinet. It's got EQ on it that's designed to work well with the guitar front end, and it's got direct outs, XLR outs, cab sim built in. So today we're building, and they come in all different wattage ranges. So today we're building a 100-watt variety over here. That's what Ramon is building. When they're finished being built over here, they're going to go over to Elsa's desk over there, where they're going to be tested. You can see a rack of them over here that have been built and tested. These are actually the 700-watt model. That's what Dave Mustaine takes out on tour with him with Megadeth. That's powering all his Marshall cabs. He's got his quad cortex going into PowerStage 700s. That's the sound that you're hearing with Megadeth, with Dave Mustaine. Once they're done over there, they're going to go out to packaging and get the faceplates put on them, packaged and ready to go.
Wow. And this is a 3-person team making all of these amps. And your same team does the pedals as well?
Same team is doing the pedals as well, yeah.
Wow. So how many of these do you make in a week or day? Or
These are we got behind in these last year because everybody wanted them, and they were hard to get, and we were stocking out, but the supply chain issues have sort of caught up with themselves, so we're able to keep up with demand. We tend to build them in big quantities and get stocked up, and then build a set of pedals, and then build another model of PowerStage. And so that's how we're doing it efficiently with that small of an operation. We'll build kind of all the same unit at once.
Yeah, it seems like they were immediately popular, like as soon as you all brought them out.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it definitely was a need in the marketplace, and I would say especially last year we saw with the return to live music, and but still, like, travel costs really high for musicians. You can't bring crew, you can't drag a big trailer behind your car when you're going out on tour. So having these really compact pedal board rigs was a lifesaver for a lot of musicians.
Particularly for fly dates, you can backline a cabinet 412 and have your rig just to plug into.
Yeah, totally. Cool. And that's why you still want EQ that's tailored for a guitar, because you show up and it's maybe a different speaker cabinet, or the venue's obviously a different size. You want to be able to tweak it without having to go change all the settings on your pedals or your modeler. Right. So I think that's part of the reason why we've been really successful with PowerStage.
Yeah, and I like your layout. It just feels like an amp. It doesn't feel, it's all laid out there like that.
Yeah, totally. Ease of use, that's part of the whole. If you're going to do a fly rig with a pedal board, you want it to be easy to use.
Yeah.
So here we are in the custom shop. This is our R&D and prototyping shop for Seymour Duncan. So many of the models we design here will go out to the production floor. Some of them are so unique and crazy that they kind of stay in here forever. We keep specs on every pickup we've ever built in here for the last 3 or 4 decades. So if you ordered something in the May of 1982, we have your paper outside in the sea container. So it's a real special place. We have over 200 years of basically pickup building experience in here, between MJ with over 40 now as of last week, Jose 43, Seymour I don't even know how many, big number. So a lot of experience. We've seen a lot of stuff, and this is where we use all those skill sets to kind of bring products together and create some great sounding pickups.
Well, it's been incredible being here. Can't thank you enough of I've been a fan forever, and it's wonderful just seeing how it all happens.
Well, I appreciate you coming to Santa Barbara and joining everybody, and thank you.
Great. All right, y'all. Till next
Thanks.
time.
Thanks.